Found an entry-level IT job, 215 Canadian dollars, Harvard alumnus, left a 2-star review. He said he'd always be there for me. He vanished like the freaking Avatar. He is in the wrong. Where do I get off trying to hold people to what they say? They loved that answer. My degree from Western Governors University hurt my chances. The job market is terrible. It is okay for you to lie on your resume. Why should they get to bypass the rules of supply and demand? They're already not hiring you. We're trying to convince employers that they needed me and my toxicity and wondered if life was even worth living at all. I found an entry-level IT job in Canada in 2025. In this video, I'll be discussing some of the struggles I faced trying to find an IT job in Canada as a WGU grad, how I went from zero tech experience to landing a remote, full-time IT service technician role with a managed service provider. Here's a little bit of background on me. I graduated from Western Governors University with a Bachelor of Science in Cybersecurity and Information Assurance on August 23rd, 2024. In 2019, I graduated from the University of Toronto with a Bachelor of Science double majoring in Human Biology and Neuroscience. After that, I worked with the Government of Canada processing employment insurance claims between September 2019 and October 2023. On October 20th, 2023, I quit that job to travel the world and I have not been employed since then. I have certifications through my WGU degree and I've also completed personal projects like setting up an Active Directory and Elastic Stack CM configuration and management. So I did not have professional working experience in tech prior to landing this job. So let's start from the beginning of the job search. Right after I graduated, I wanted to have my resume, cover letter, and LinkedIn profile professionally edited since I was changing careers into the IT field and I didn't know how to create an IT resume. I paid 215 Canadian dollars for somebody on Fiverr to do all this for me, and that somebody in question is Richard Lambert. He's a certified professional resume writer, Harvard alumnus, and has over 20,000 5-star reviews on Fiverr. So I figured if I couldn't entrust my resume in future to somebody with that kind of portfolio, then who could I entrust it to? I ordered the resume, cover letter, and LinkedIn profile editing service from Richard on August 19th, and he delivered the first draft on August 27th. I submitted a revision request on August 28th, and I did not hear back from him until I checked in on him on September 3rd. Apparently he got food poisoning and didn't even bother to tell me. The final product was delivered on September 4th, and it was pretty disappointing. The cover letter was missing a word, someone else's name would appear in the header if I tried to create a second page, the resume included irrelevant volunteer experience and was unnecessarily 2 pages long. I actually tried to apply to a couple of jobs with that resume and cover letter and I never heard anything back. Ultimately, after waiting 16 days and paying $215, I was disappointed by the quality and the lack of communication, so I left a 2-star review. So Richard replied to my review essentially saying that tailoring my resume to each position was important and that if I needed help with it, he'd be there to support me. So I took him up on his offer when I needed help editing my resume and he told me he couldn't help me because of that negative review. He said he'd always be there for me, and the moment I needed him the most, he vanished like the freaking Avatar. I get that he's not obligated to help me after I left that bad review, but he is in the wrong for offering support and then refusing to provide it. Like, God, where do I get off trying to hold people to what they say? Like, God, the gall of me. I'm going to show you guys a spreadsheet of all the jobs I applied for. I applied for my first job on July 25th, 2024, and I applied for 86 jobs before finally landing my IT service technician job. For reference, when I graduated with my first degree back in 2019, I applied to about 50 jobs before finally landing my job with the Government of Canada. It was actually one of the first positions I applied for, but because of how slow the government hiring process is, I had time to apply for other positions before I received my letter of offer. So I applied for that job May of 2019, and then I started that job in September 2019. Every single job here represents a minimum of 1 hour of my life that I spent tailoring my resumes and cover letters and completing tedious online application forms where I'd upload my resume, but they still expect me to manually input my work experience onto the application form. Some of the jobs I applied for weren't even in IT. They were jobs that I was overqualified for and applied for to make ends meet, and I still got rejected by them. On November 20th, I applied for an IT service technician job with a managed service provider in Canada. I had a screening interview on December 24th, followed by an actual interview interview on January 7th with the IT service manager. The interview consisted of both behavioral and technical questions, and one of the questions I remember them asking me is they wanted to know how I would foster a sense of camaraderie amongst my teammates, and I told them that I would try to be approachable by just being silly and being me, and they loved that answer. After I said that, the IT service manager really warmed up to me, and he opened up to me, and he told me that he typically doesn't hire cybersecurity graduates because they act like they know everything and they just want to jump straight into cybersecurity. So my degree from Western Governors University actually hurt my chances of getting this job, and odds are it probably hurt my chances of getting other jobs as well. He told me that he only interviewed me because of my customer service background, and he was very lenient with me during the technical part of the interview, and he told me that even though there were other candidates to interview, he told me that I should be confident in how I performed. So he basically told me that I already got the job during the interview, and that was honestly the most confident I've ever felt in an interview. I received a call from the IT service manager on January 13th, 2025. He offered me the position, sent over the contract, I signed it, and my first day as an IT service technician will be January 20th. I'm now going to share some words of wisdom and some tips and tricks I used to help me find this job. The Canadian job market is terrible right now, and it is filled with fake job postings used to commit labor market impact assessment fraud to hire cheaper, more exploitable foreign workers. Job seekers spend hours customizing their resumes and cover letters to each job and completing tedious online application forms where they upload their resume but still have to manually input their work experience and education details onto the application form only to face rejection or silence. When you get rejected from a job, the employer isn't obligated to tell you why they rejected your application. So you think the problem is with you when you tweak your resume hoping to improve it, but oftentimes those edits that you make could end up making your resume worse. It also doesn't help that there's no universal resume standard, so one strategy that works for one person might not work for another. Some people think it's important to have a professional summary at the start of your resume, some people think it's important to keep your resume to one page or to use a certain font, etc. But for each one of those opinions, there's somebody who did the exact opposite and managed to find a job doing that. What I'm going to say is going to be a very unpopular job hunting tip. It is okay for you to lie on your resume. The universe isn't fair 100% of the time, so it isn't reasonable or healthy for you to hold yourself to complete honesty 100% of the time either. The employers who would judge, shame, and penalize you for lying on your resume are the same people who would post fake job listings on the Government of Canada Job Bank, claim to the government that they weren't able to find a suitable Canadian worker, and then the government would just believe their claims with no scrutiny and allow them to hire a temporary foreign worker to fill that position. They're the same employers who engage in price gouging, justifying exorbitant price hikes by citing supply and demand while ignoring those same principles during the COVID-19 pandemic. During the pandemic, there was a high demand for workers, but people weren't willing to accept poor working conditions and wages. So what did the employers do? They lobbied the government and had them flood the country with international students and foreign workers. Why should they get to bypass the rules of supply and demand? If demand for workers is high, they should offer better wages and working conditions. But sorry, going back to my original point on whether or not to lie on your resume, in the worst case scenario, they won't hire you. But guess what? They're already not hiring you, which is why you got to this point of having to decide on whether or not to lie or not. By lying on your resume, you're increasing the likelihood that you'll be offered an interview and an opportunity to plead your case as to why you're a good fit for the position you're applying for. You also get interview experience, so you can kind of learn from your mistakes in that interview and apply them to subsequent interviews and perform better. I'm going to show you guys a recording of an interview I did where the employer caught me lying on my resume and how I handled that situation.
And what about HubSpot and Zendesk? What environments did you use those in?
So, okay, I didn't actually use those, but I am familiar with them. So I know that like Zendesk is more for like, it's like a comprehensive ticketing system that companies use, and I know that HubSpot's kind of like an all-in-one solution. Again, I'm familiar with them. I don't have I wouldn't say I have
You never
experience with them.
you never used them directly or even seen them.
No, not really. I'm sorry.
No, that's no problem. Hey man, like you gotta put stuff on the resume, it gets you in the door. Thank you for your honesty.
I added tools that I had no experience with onto my resume, and when the interviewer asked me about my experience with those tools, I was completely honest and told him I had no experience with them, but I was familiar with them and I added them to my resume based on that. So when I say that it's okay for you to lie on your resume, I mean that you should still do some research on the things you're lying about. That way you can answer questions about them. That way you can say that you're familiar with them and added them to your resume based on that. that. During my interview with Northern Results Inc., one of the things they asked me to do was to choose 3 words to describe who I was as a person. And one of the words that they wanted to hear was silly.
Did I almost hear you drop a silly?
Yeah. Like I can be
That's cool.
I can be pretty
Hey,
silly
one of
sometimes.
our core values is fun, man. You got to keep things a little bit light. So like it's not a bad thing to be a little lighthearted. That's fine.
They wanted somebody who was easygoing and fun to work with. So I learned from that, and I used that word again, silly, in my IT service technician interview, and it really helped me to get the job. Lying on your resume is a high risk, low reward action you can take that can definitely pay off at times. My second job hunting tip is if you have an ethnic sounding first name, get a preferred name and use that on your resume. People are inherently biased, and we're in an employer's market, so you really don't want to give them any reason to not hire you. They might not be pleasant to work with, but you can get the job experience and use that to kind of transition into bigger and better things. My third job hunting tip is to be a decent person or learn how to be one. In both the tech interviews I had, they did ask technical questions, but what really mattered to them was knowing whether or not I was the kind of person who they'd get along with and who'd be fun to work with. They can teach you all the technical skills that you need for a job, but they can't teach you how to be a decent human being. My fourth job hunting tip is to save copies of the job ads for any jobs that you apply for. You don't want to be in a position where you're granted an interview, but you don't know what to talk about because the employer took down the job ad and you can't access it anymore. My fifth job hunting tip is to use ChatGPT to tailor your resumes and cover letters to the positions you're applying for. It can be a really good tool if you use the correct prompts and provide detailed information. I actually have a Word doc where I explain in detail the responsibilities and accomplishments of each job I've held in the past. I provide this information to ChatGPT and ask it to create tailored resumes and cover letters for me. ChatGPT can make mistakes, so you have to be sure to review the information it spits out to ensure it accurately reflects your responsibilities and achievements. My sixth job hunting tip is to try your hardest to secure a student job before you graduate. If I had known how rough the job market would be, I would have deliberately delayed my graduation. I would have timed it so that I'd graduate in either December or January, because that's when most companies start hiring for summer roles. If you're currently enrolled in a secondary or post-secondary program, or if you've graduated within the past 6 months, you can apply for a student summer job with the government of Ontario. For example, if you graduated in December, you could apply for summer jobs up until June of the following year. December is also when the Ontario internship program opens for applications. Even if you don't have all the skills and knowledge they're looking for, still apply. They don't want a resume from you, they just want you to answer a few screening questions. The hardest part about job hunting, at least for me, was trying to convince employers that they needed me and my toxicity in their lives and trying to convince them to pay for it. So throughout my job hunting experience, there were many times where I felt discouraged and wondered if life was even worth living at all if I couldn't find a job and I couldn't pay for what I needed and wanted. And I actually noticed people online posting that they felt the same way as well. And that is why my seventh and final job hunting tip is to never give up. Keep applying and putting yourself out there. I didn't meet all of the requirements of the IT service technician job that I ended up landing, but the hiring manager gave me a chance to plead my case about why I'm a good fit for the position, and I ended up getting it. So all it takes is a bit of luck, but you have to put in the work to make it happen. And that is how I came to land my remote full-time entry-level IT service technician position with a managed service provider in Canada. I haven't shared the news with my friends or family yet. My family doesn't even know that I have 2 degrees. I started off this year on January 1st applying for a job at the municipal golf course just to make ends meet. So I'm on top of the world right now. My days of being a NEET are finally over.